Hello and welcome to Journalist Hangout UK, the show where we discuss issues both African and worldwide, which are affecting the continent. And we look at how these issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo and I'm pleased to welcome our panel. Juliana Olayinka, journalist and broadcaster. Ayo Johnson, journalist and specialist in African affairs. And Thamsanqa Zhou, journalist and broadcaster. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very interesting week, I have to say, here in London. But our first subject matter that we're discussing is, the UK. Today is a year's anniversary from when we last had an election. And before we went to the election, Juliana, our Prime Minister told us that she was going to the people because she was going to get the people's mandate. And she wanted to strengthen her hand for her discussions in Brussels with Brexit. So a year on, where are we at?
Gosh, I don't think even Theresa May knows where we are. But one thing I will say, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, is that I have some sympathy for her. I think looking back a year, I probably didn't. I think it was a silly decision, especially when she had a decent majority to go into a general election, although I can understand the strategy behind it. She did want the support from the nation and from the other parties on a Brexit strategy. It failed. She still is leader. The Conservatives are still in power, albeit part of a coalition with the DUP, and I think that's wherein lies the problem. The Conservative Party is very factioned at the moment. We obviously heard that our Foreign Minister Boris Johnson said Donald Trump would be better at delivering Brexit than his own Prime Minister, and there are issues upon issues, and I'm sure we'll discuss them now.
The issues are endless. I don't think any of us imagined, what was going to happen a year on. But did you think that going to the polls for Brexit in the first instance was going to cause us so much problems 2 years on?
Well, she took a huge risk, a huge gamble, and the Conservative Party thought that they'd come through the fact that so many people had voted for the referendum in the first place, which was a shocker to many, and the fact that they believed that this was their time to rubber stamp her authority, but a huge gamble, and at that risk, because she could have lost those elections, and more so, the Labour Party could have won. And in fact, if the Labour Party themselves had not been infighting, which means all the politicians that you see currently supporting the Labour leader, if they had supported him then, they could have won those elections, and disappointingly so. But I think she took a gamble, she took a risk, but it paid off. But I'm not a conservative lover. In fact, I think personally that the reason why UKIP and these far-right parties are like on the margins of the society right now, because the Conservatives have adopted a lot of their policies. So they've become very much like the nasty party.
Very interesting. Tam, let me come to you. Was it about getting a majority, or was it an ego thing, much like we saw going to the polls for the referendum in 2016?
Well, just like most of the political shenanigans that we see around the country, whether it's in Zimbabwe or in America or Nigeria, it's all about personalities within a particular party. The election had nothing to do with Britain or Europe or Brexit. It was all about control within the Tory party, because Theresa May had come at the back of an election that had been won by David Cameron. And what she did when she came in, she decided to get rid of all the people that were working with David Cameron. And George Osborne, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer and others, kept reminding her that the mandate she was using, the manifesto she was changing, was a David Cameron issue, not her own. Right. So she decided to call the election, thinking that Labour were in disarray. She was just going to walk that election, but it was more about her trying to prove to David Cameron, the Tory party, the 1922 committee, that she was in control. And of course, things went horribly wrong. Now she's in a weaker position.
Right, so she wasn't in control. Juliana, so she's not in control according to Tam. It's being reported at the moment that we have the weakest political class we've ever had. So who really is in control if Mrs. May isn't?
Well, Theresa May is control. Obviously, she's the leader of the party. There were rumours that David Davis, the Brexit secretary, was going to resign. He didn't. I think she's in a really tough situation, and she's in a situation that no other Conservative politician, including Rees-Mogg, are going to step up to the plate and try to do. You know, she's trying to negotiate Britain's exit from the EU while pleasing and while trying not to cause any issues between the North and the South in Ireland. And it's a very difficult situation she's in. Of course, as well, there are diplomatic relations with America that she's trying to resolve. Theresa May is definitely in control. Is it a nice position that she's in? No, but I don't think there's any other leader that would be able to do it any better. The party need to stand behind her, and I think that's what the problem is. It's not just what's going on with other parties in Britain, it's about the Conservative Party and the fact that they're not standing behind her. And we've got Boris Johnson and the like,
she's still
publicly slating her, which I think is ridiculous. And it doesn't do any good for their party.
Right, I hear you there, but I know you want to make a point. But before you do that, you know, with all the infighting and all the challenges that she's had, and all the talking tough that she's also, you know, made, and having to calm down as she went along, what kind of Brexit do you think we're going to end up with?
Well, the one that I hope, it's never too late to say you got it wrong. It's never too late to remove yourself from the position. There's never too late to ask for another referendum. There are a lot of things that the Conservatives can do. If it's getting too hot, getting too difficult, clearly it is.
Get out of the kitchen.
Get it, absolutely. Say, put your hands up and say it's enough. And no one's going to beat them. In fact, we would love them for that.
And
I think,
who would?
Well, I would.
The majority that voted to leave
the Leavers are
EU.
not going to, because and you have a lot of Remainers now that are saying, you know what, let's just get out. So who's going to love them for putting their hand up and saying?
Well, this doesn't apply just to the Conservatives. It applies to the Labour Party as well, because the vast majority of them voted as well to leave. You remember we had campaigns which were being pushed by all corners of different political parties. So putting your hand up doesn't mean that it's a particular political party issue. It means that a united front is saying we got it wrong. There's no harm in that, because guess what? We're going to be poorer for it. We're going to lose jobs. Oh yes, the economy is not going to be working as best as it would otherwise. Think about it. You're going to be by yourself. Well, we're going to trade with Donald Trump. He can't even keep a solid deal with many other countries.
It's not just about being by yourself.
We voted to leave. And
it's not just about being by yourself, because, you know, Tam, I'm going to come to you. The whole Brexit vote conversation is threatening the unity of the United Kingdom as it stands. So there is that. And there's also the conversation that we really need to look at, which has also come out of this whole Brexit thing, is that Britain is now being seen as being very, very intolerant. Once upon a time, we were the most tolerant country. Now we're an intolerant space to be in.
But you would think that the Windrush scandal would have changed the attitudes of a lot of people. And there is currency in the way that people look at it when they say the Brexit vote was an anti-establishment vote, and not necessarily the ingredients of what is to be expected once Britain leaves. So there will be a lot of people who would think twice about what they are likely to have, because if Britain plunges off the cliff of Dover, the economy goes down, the social structure, everything else will fall apart. Racism will increase. There's so many things, because once the economy suffers, then everything else follows to fall apart. So what you are likely to have is a scenario where the Tories want to keep Theresa May in there until the Brexit thing is done, because no other leader wants to be the one responsible for the mess that will be Brexit. So she's likely to survive. But then Northern Ireland is a problem. Gibraltar will be a problem. There are
Scotland are having still saying they want to.
Well, Scotland is easier to deal with because there is that devolution. Northern Ireland is a bitter area where if you have a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, or even along the sea, that will be problematic, because the Republicans in Northern Ireland would love that. But the DUP, who are supporting the Tory government, would disagree. So you might have a Spanish problem where Rajoy had the support of the Basque Nationalist Party, and then he lost that support, which is why Sanchez is now the Prime Minister. So it's possible the Tories could lose the DUP support.
Juliana, you're nodding a great deal, throughout what Tam is telling us there. But, this Northern Ireland issue, if we're not able to resolve it, can we still have a hard Brexit?
No, we can't have a hard Brexit, and I think that's the issue, and that's the reason why, again, David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, said he was willing to resign over this issue, because Theresa May, and I think history will remember and accept the fact that she is trying to do a good job, is saying that even if the time limit does run out in 2019, we haven't decided what we're going to do with this border. Let's keep it as it is, even if that means that we stay in the customs union. I'm not willing to say there's going to be any sort of infrastructure on this border, because I don't want to go back to the years of violence that we had.
Continue. Aya, very quickly, what are your final words on this issue? Oh, and by the way, in the midst of all of this that we have seen happen, we have a more diverse parliament also.
Do we?
Apparently.
Well, we have, so but does the cabinet reflect that? No, absolutely not. So I think the Good Friday Agreement, if it doesn't fit in, if it doesn't work, then we're in trouble. And of course, the Conservatives, it's never too late to say we got it wrong. It's never too late to say, let's go back to the drawing board.
Thank you very much, Aya. I personally think Theresa May is being attacked because she's a woman. Well, we're going to take a quick break now, and we have plenty more to discuss. So please join us in a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Journalist Hangout UK. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo, and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel. Juliana Olayinka, Aya Johnson, and Thamsanqa Zhou are still with me. Ladies and gentlemen, this has got to be my favorite story in this part of the show, which is that 8 African countries are listed in the top 50 of the Global Peace Index. In other words, we have 8 countries in Africa that are peaceful and safe, in comparison to the general narrative that we would normally have. So I'm going to come to you, Tam, very quickly. At the sound of that, are you surprised, or you just think, but of course it's always been there?
Well, I've been a journalist for too many years to know that you have to read carefully to any headlines, especially when statistics are being mentioned. So the main thing will be what is actually being measured. Because when you look at countries like Mauritius, the politics
By the
of
way,
it,
Mauritius is in the top 20.
I know it's right at the top. But when you look at the politics in Mauritius, it's atrocious. You've got a president who is being fired for shopping. The Jhuk,
but we're talking about peace. We're talking about peace.
This is my point. My point being, Africa is normally looked at badly because of its politics, because of the political leaders, rather than the people. What this means, what this appears to be measuring is when it goes down to the people at the village, people in town, on the streets, by the beach, in wherever you go, you get a smile from an African.
Absolutely.
You get, that hospitality that you would get independent of the politics within that country.
Right.
The politics in Mauritius, from the Ramgulans to the Jagnos, it's elitist and it's also as difficult as it would
so
be in Nigeria. So the politics
doesn't affect the peace of Mauritius?
According to how this has been measured. So the African
we're measuring peace.
Has always been there.
We're measuring peace on this occasion. I am going to come to you because our favorite country is at number 34.
Which one is that?
And that's Sierra Leone.
Oh, yeah.
Given where Sierra Leone was 16 years ago, and as one who hails from Sierra Leone, how do you see this? Do you feel that the narrative has been, wholly unfair, unjust?
Well, I think thanks to this report that's come out, because I think it stops all this death, disease and destruction narrative about Africa being the worst.
But I don't think we hear enough about this report, so how will it stop it?
Well, it means that countries can actually use this to sell themselves, to say, guess what? We are peaceful. You can come here safely. You don't have to be frightened. And I think that narrative is key. But I think, Tam, you're so wrong in your assertions that you're going to mix political shenanigans with what's happening with a peaceful environment. We have political issues here in the UK. Do you speak foul about them? No, you don't. So I think it's wrong. But anyway, I think it's a good thing. I think it sends the right signals and it puts us in the right position to be able to attract a lot of investment from tourists.
I mean, Juliana, this is really interesting. When we look at the population of, some of these countries, Iceland is hailing at number 1. Iceland only has 350,000 people. And some of these countries, as we know, have 250 million, 180 million, you know, and
a billion in China.
Almost there. So when we look at this, do we think that the density of the population has an impact on how peaceful the country is, or
No,
it doesn't
I don't
have
think
an effect?
so. You know, they were looking at the military, they were looking at international relations, and I think politics, to agree with Tam, is part of that, because you look at a country like United States of America, you know, people are burning flags in the Middle East, American flags. If you look at in the Middle East, you're not seeing them burning flags in Nigeria. So I do think how a country is politically...
The KKK are burning more than flags in the USA.
What's that got to do with the results?
It does.
No, but you're saying that people are burning flags in the Middle East, and I'm just saying that the burning flags thing is not unique to other parts and not.
No, what I'm saying is the reason why a country like United States of America may be seen as more dangerous than some parts of African countries is because how it's seen politically, how it's getting itself involved in wars. If there are tensions, for example, you know, Kim Jong-un has more issues with the United States than it does with a country like Sierra Leone, and this is how this survey has looked at its results, and that's true because I read it and I looked at it.
You disagree?
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, the reason why the United States is one of the worst countries to live in is because there's a war happening in every state. You're more than likely to be shot, to be stabbed. In fact, Britain is somehow...
The US is actually at number 147, I think.
There we go. And in fact, Britain is not a safe place. You're more than likely to be stabbed or shot these days than you would otherwise be in a place like Sierra Leone.
121, sorry,
there we go.
not 47.
So what they're saying here is countries like Sierra Leone and Mauritius are very safe. You can go there, don't have to be frightened, be perfectly attuned with yourself. And
okay, so
we're obviously looking at
all right. So let's look at something else that also informs this, you know, index, and that is that we're looking at literacy rates. So, for instance, Rwanda has 80% literacy rate. Rwanda, as we all know where Rwanda is, and also the child mortality rate is down. The US cannot boast of the same, you know, literacy rate as Rwanda does. So, is it still a political thing, Tam?
In a big way, because what you have is a government that deliberately targets certain sectors of, say, the economy or in terms of policy. In Zimbabwe, for instance, in the 80s and 90s, education was all there was. That's where most of the money was going. And that's why Zimbabwe has the highest literacy rate in probably most of the countries you will ever have recorded. And those people are going abroad and they are showing their skills. Rwanda is coming up. So the fact that education in Britain, America, or any other place will be considered differently, they're talking about grammar schools, they're talking about putting money somewhere, is not the way Rwanda and the politics in Rwanda would look at it. So I agree with Juliana. It's very difficult to read these results outside the context within which
forgive me. I was trying to pay attention to you and listen to you there, but I got confused. So literacy rate in Rwanda is 80%.
It's a deliberate move by the government.
Okay, so
to drive it.
So hold on, and then you told us
the United States.
I'm not comparing. I was just mentioning the fact that there are other indices that were also measured, and my question here is: with these measures, is it still down to the politics of the country? Because in every country, you know, every government in every country has to pay attention to the education of that country.
Okay, here's a quick example. In Sierra Leone, during the time when there was a civil war.
No, don't associate war with the country now. They're one of the most peaceful.
This is my point.
Okay, pause. Let's remain peaceful as we discuss the issue. Juliana, wait for me, guys. Wait for me, guys. Okay, pause. Pause time.
During that time.
We need to be peaceful as we discuss the peaceful issues of Africa. Okay, so time, take it away again.
Right. The politics comes in because where you have conflict, where you have political crisis, where you have maybe a civil war, you are not going to get those high literacy rates that you see with the stability provided by the politics.
Life expectancy in Tunisia has also gone as high as what Sweden once used to have it. So, Ayo,
can I come in?
No, please, it's my turn.
Bear with me. So let's keep it peaceful because we are discussing the headlines that Africa never seems to, we don't hear around the world about Africa. So we're going to remain peaceful as we do that. So Ayo, very quickly, as I was saying, life expectancy has gone that much higher in Sweden, in Tunisia, that equal to Sweden, as it were. So, you know, over here, it's about the political aspect of things. But you're saying, no, that's not the issue. So break it down to us. What is informing this much better index for Africa?
Well, it's the fact that everything is getting far more brighter and people are struggling to come to terms with that reality. You know, they used to think that my football team's the best, my country's the best, I wear the best clothes. But guess what? The truth is, Africa's got the best climate, they've got the best people, they've got the best countries, and they're more peaceful. And more so, educational levels are so high, they're far better than Europe and the United States. And people are just struggling to come to terms with that. Tough luck.
But Juliana, I mean, I hear what time.
To speak. Thank
well,
you.
we can't all do it at the same time. We've got to do one after the
Yes.
other. Isn't it just a case of the narrative that we've had for not just, you know, centuries, but for all our lives, that Africa is poor. Africa is not a good place to be. Africa is all about the wars. Is that not really what has informed us not being able to look at what the real issues are, which is that we do have countries in Africa that are more peaceful than there are in the West?
I agree with you, and I also think we all agreeing. This is great news for Africa, but I think Safe Africa, I only think that headline will be used in this discussion. I think the Peace Index, that wasn't the headline that came out of it. They were just results. This is what, from what they tested, these were the results.
But it's
and
about
it was
what's
fortunate,
reported, isn't
and it was fortunate that some African countries were higher than others and higher than some countries in the West.
Fortunate in what sense?
Well, fortunate that the narrative you're saying has been described for Africa for years wasn't resulted in this test.
Well, why would they?
But I'm lost, sorry. You're saying it was fortunate that Africa is featured to be part of the top 50, for instance.
Okay, let me break it down. Let me break it down for you.
How is that fortunate for Africa? Is it not the reality of those countries?
Let me break it down in a very peaceful way to you.
Thank you, please do.
I'm happy that there are African countries that feature high on this test, and that's it.
Right, okay. I wish we had more time to peacefully conclude on this because there's a lot more. Well, don't forget to follow us at RealJH UK on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. I'm Priscilla Nwikpo, and from the entire team here in sunny London, it's goodbye. Thank you for watching JH UK.